Hey guys, today we are going to flip this old antique hutch that I found on Facebook Marketplace for $80. I like a lot of the details, I like the moldings on the front, I like the trim on the top. I was a little bit concerned by the splitting wood on the top, but it turns out it's not splitting or coming apart like you see right there. I think it had just warped. I really love these details right here. I'm using Clean Strip. It's a chemical stripper that I pick up at Home Depot. Of all the chemical strippers, it is my favorite. It doesn't leave a lot of residue or mess. It doesn't get gooey or gunky. But if it's really, really hot, like it is in the summers in Houston, it will dry quickly. So I was doing this, I can't remember, in the morning or the evening where it was a little cooler. And then when it does dry, it is really hard to clean up. I really should be wearing gloves. When I have to actually touch the chemical itself, I do put gloves on, but I should probably wear them anyway. I'm just using a hard bristled brush. It's not really good enough, so right here I switched to a wire bristle brush. You just have to be careful with that because the stripper makes the wood damp, which can leave gouge marks and create slivers or kind of make the wood almost fuzzy, and then it's not clean and crisp like you want it to be. Once I switched over to actually using that scrub brush, it made a huge difference. I should have started with that instead of worrying about these details because it got right into the finer points and cleaned these things up. Once I've wiped most of the stripping agent off, I use paint thinner or acetone. I think some people use vinegar just to neutralize it and make sure it doesn't do any more damage to the wood. This little scraping set from Home Depot has come in clutch. I really love it. There's something really satisfying about doing this, but it does take a while. At some point, I tried to actually use the clean strip to take this stuff off. I don't know what was different about this varnish and this stain down here on the legs, but I could not get it to come off, and it ended up being just a harder ordeal later to get everything off and to get those legs cleaned up. I am a sucker for natural wood furniture, light natural wood furniture, but I wish I had this machine to do it. It's a beautiful abrasive blaster. It shoots little steel particles out and vacuums them back up, and it cleans all the details for you. I saw this lady in France using it on Instagram. I sent her a message to ask her what she was using Google Translate. She hasn't responded. We'll see. But eventually I do want to get that. Then I'd be more willing to do more projects like this because it would be more worth my time. Darn thing kept moving. So I realized I should probably lay this down and it would be a lot easier to scrape it if it weren't moving. So obviously I had some type of costume change, or maybe it's just the next day. Laid it down to get a better vantage point for scraping so I could really press into the wood and scrape. Don't worry, I didn't cut my finger off on a table saw again or anything. I just had an ATV land on it instead, but it's fine, it'll get better. Oh, there's that thing again. Wish I had one. Back to scraping. But now that most of these details are pretty clean, getting to the point where I can bust out the sander. I love power tools. Here I'm using a 220 grit sandpaper. It's pretty smooth. When I'm removing a finish or a stain, I start with 120 or 150 and move my way up in grit to 220. So here, for example, I'd be starting with 150 or 120, scraping off of some stuff that wouldn't come off, and then moving up in grit like you just saw me do. I do love when I get to break out the hand sanding for small details because it's such a nice feeling to feel like you've finally gotten somewhere, that you're kind of wrapping up the project and putting these final touches on it to make it really feel complete. These drawers were in bad shape. They'd been repaired a couple times, so I'm just labeling each piece so I know how to put it back together. Tap, 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 get this thing apart. It'll also help me really clean up the inside with the sander so that I can get into all the corners, because there are no corners anymore. It's just a nice flat surface. I switched to these Diablo sanding nets. Again, with the grits, I'm probably a 120 or 150 here, and I really like it. It's really working well. You will see, though, as I continue to sand, that this wood is a different color, which is problematic, and we will have to fix that later. I guess it's not the wood itself, it's the veneer that's laid over this piece of wood, because you can see on the backside, it's light again. Misting the wood before I apply a paint wash. A paint wash is just a number of parts paint to water, and I made it too thin on this. I was afraid because of the heat that it would dry too fast, which is one of the reasons I misted the wood with just regular water. If it is too dry or too hot, the paint wash will dry before you have an opportunity to wipe it away and blend it into the other paint washed areas. So I cleaned everything up with this rag, added more paint, and you can see it's more viscous, but when I wipe it off, it wipes off clean and easy. So this was a great paint mixture. I call this actually a beige wash, and I just use any tan paint that I have on hand. I usually do 2 parts water to 1 part paint, sometimes 3 parts water to 1 part paint, depending on the project and how much the wood actually needs to be lightened up. I opted for a paint wash just to make the different tones of wood even colored. Over here on the right side, some strips of wood were a lot darker, just like the drawer. The paint wash just evens those out. It's not appropriate every time, but I actually really like it, and it's cheaper than going and buying stain. Remember that drawer? I'm actually just putting regular clothing bleach, like you would put in your laundry machine, on top, and I'm wiping it in with just a regular rag and letting it sit in the sun. And you'll see side by side that it's quite a bit lighter. So I actually did 2 rounds of that. Then I did a paint wash, and then I found a stain that matched the color of the rest of the cabinet, and I put a stain on top. Here I'm just doing a light sanding. The paint wash will raise the grain a little bit, making the finish less smooth. So before I spray, I always just do a little sand, not enough to go through the paint wash, but enough to make it smooth, clean it with a tack cloth, start spraying on my top coat. My favorite top coat is Minwax Polycrylic from Lowe's in a flat finish. I like the flat finish. I think it's more trendy and modern anyway. This is just my little $80 sprayer from Amazon. I love it. I think it's $100 now. I'll link it in the description though, along with all the other products that I used for this flip. It's so hot, it was dry by the time I was done spraying. My wife decided I should probably film this portion, me staging it. You can see her reflection in the glass, giving me tips because frankly, I don't know how to do this part very well. If you think it looks a little murky or weird in these videos, it's because I forgot to wipe off the lens from all the sawdust that had collected over the duration of this project. Whoops. This is a really fun and satisfying part though, because you just get to see everything coming together. Go ahead and take a look at the before. And here's the after.